So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Christoph Safferling. I'm professor of international law and criminal law at the university here in Erlangen and Nürnberg. We've come to an end of what was a truly wonderful conference. We heard so many different topics. We had 7 panels. And in addition, I think yesterday afternoon, a very insightful introduction into the history of this room and a visit to the museum, which is above. We had an interdisciplinary approach, which is commendable and certainly something special. And I could hear that all the speakers thanked the organizers for this wonderful conference and for the invitation. And I had the impression that was not mere friendliness, but it was very honest and a very honest sentiment that we experienced something very special and unique over these last 2 days. Now, you cannot expect from me to put now these little puzzle pieces together in one grand painting. I'm certainly not up to that. But in these closing remarks, I might highlight 1 or 2 issues that sort of struck me as being important and that interest me as someone who has been looked at in particular at the Nuremberg legacy from a German perspective. And it has always been difficult from this perspective to measure the influence and the importance of the sister tribunal, so to speak, in the Far East, in Tokyo. And I don't know if you've noticed when you go up to the exhibition, we have a mentioning of the Tokyo trials. We put up a couple of posters. But I remember that we have long discussions whether we should do that at all, because after all, it's a museum about Nuremberg, and in which way we should do that. I mean, you've seen it. It's been a bit of a compromise, but maybe if the exhibition is going to be enlarged, there will be more space for even the Tokyo Tribunal. It was interesting for me to see that we have obviously even differences in the perceptions of criminal law, both of criminal law and international law here in Germany and in Japan. And of course, we have to understand that from an international law viewpoint, the Nuremberg and later on the Tokyo Tribunal, they have been a major break of the tradition, the Westphalian tradition that was there before. And the political decision to start that was obviously taken before in the Moscow Declaration in 1943. And we mustn't forget that also the St. James Declaration a year before in 1942, which was formulated by those exile governments from Europe, like the Hungarian, the Polish, all these occupied powers. They had their exile government in London, and they pressured the Allied powers in favor of having criminal trials, of prosecuting those atrocities which was ongoing in their very countries. So we have a difference in the perception of criminal law. We have heard about a natural law debate and a positivistic approach. We can sit down and discuss this in detail because it's the same in Germany. The entire sort of justification myths of the lawyers are all based on positivist ideas as an excuse, as a justification. And at the same time, with Japan and Judge Osaki, you mentioned that just right away. We have a great tradition of a common academic exchange in criminal law. I mean, if I go to Keio University Law School, they probably have more German literature than compared to my hometown library. It's very, very impressive, this exchange that we have. So let's continue to transport this discourse into the international criminal law scene, because we don't do that. And even into the history of criminal law, because we haven't done that either. It's of course it has obviously a lot to do with Germany and Japan being sort of the losers, as we've heard, of the Second World War. And it has a lot to do with the post-war reactions on the crimes and the trials. And I assure you, Professor Coe, I'm very thankful for your personal words we just heard here, that I understand that you have difficulties with the Nuremberg trials, because it is not only about you. The Nuremberg trial, Tokyo trial, is also about us. So we share, I think, the difficulties that you have with reacting to the crimes and the dealing with the crimes. But for me personally, again, criminal law and to sit down and try to endeavor the truth of what was behind is the only answer possible, because otherwise these atrocities will haunt you the rest of your life. And I mean the rest of, the life of the society you live in. Of course, after the war, it was asked how it was possible that these war criminals were released at such a great speed. Of course, the sentiment was, we need to return to an ordinary proceeding. We need to have normality. We need to re-establish something like a German identity. At the same time, the necessity was great because, as you of course know, Germany then ended up to be a separate country. There was a wall in the middle of Berlin and a fence going through Germany. And anti-communism was for the Western society the new credo. It was a super glue for the Western integration. And through that, a lot of the former Nazis came into the government offices, came again to become prosecutors and judges in the Western German society, because it was the sense that it's better to have an old Nazi because you can use him as a decent anti-communist. And as I said, the history of that hasn't stopped. I mean, as we speak now, just I think 4 weeks ago, a former war criminal died, Oskar Gruening, and he was convicted at the age of 94 for being a concentration camp border guard and being an administrative person at Auschwitz, collecting the money and so forth. It never stops. In 1950, we released these criminals at an early stage, and now we sentence a 94-year-old for 4 or 5 years, which obviously he will not survive. And we always have to reconsider that we're standing here now in this room. When you think back, in 1995, there was a small conference of great ICL enthusiasts, a bunch of people who were at the margin of the society. I recall I found this in the files of the Justice Ministry. There was a press release by the then Federal Minister of Justice, Sabine Leuthäuser-Schnarrenberger, stating 1995, so the Yugoslav Tribunal was already operating, stating that the Nuremberg legacy is important and it's been a good thing. It was hard to get this press release published in the first place, and I don't recall that any newspaper actually took it up. So that was 1995. 2005, at the 60th anniversary, we had several commemoration events in this room. In these 10 years, everything had changed. But it's only 10 years, it's only been 2005. And it was only then that we planned here in Nuremberg to have a memoriam, to have a museum, which was opened in 2010. So, and 4 or 5 years later, then this academy was founded. This is all very recent. So we mustn't stand here and applaud ourselves as Germans, and we have always, been ready to talk about the Nuremberg trials and our failures and our crimes. We haven't. We haven't taken up this legacy for such a long time. So we must keep this in mind when we talk to our dear friends from Japan. So I understand at the end of this conference that there are so many issues still to tackle, so much to explore about Tokyo, Berg, so to speak. And we should establish a real dialogue and continue to exchange our ideas and our sentiments even. And this room that we are in here now will soon no longer be an active courtroom. It still is today. So on Tuesday, the coming week, there will be a criminal trial going on. And the person who has been accused of, I don't know, some capital murder or whatever, he will be sitting right there where where Göring sat. And he will be tried in this room. So this will soon be over. On the one side, I'm glad, because then the academy can move in, the memoriam has more space, and we can, celebrate this memory in a way, and use this legacy here to look also to the future and take the steps necessary for the future. But on the other hand, I'm also a little bit sad, because you have to have in mind what this room has experienced. It was opened in 1916. Bavaria was a kingdom, and we had an emperor. And the struggle for justice started in this room under these circumstances. Then we had the Weimar Republic, and it was a democratic courtroom, so to speak. In 1933, the Nazis took over, and the Sondergericht, with upholding injustice judgments, sat in this room. This is what this room endured, had to go through. And in 1945, in this incredible moment where this idea of international criminal justice materialized, again in this very room, and we had this great international trial and then the follow-up trials. And in 1961, it was given back to the Bavarian justice system, and since then we have an operating democratic courtroom here. And we are happy to have that, and we are hoping that it'll endure and that it'll continue, of course. What I want to say is that the rule of law is something that we always have to fight for, because in this room we can see how fragile it is. And it is important to keep this in mind, and this, after all, is, I think, why we are all here, because we want to sit together and fight for more justice, for peace and security in the world. And this is why we look into the past and try to understand from our different political and academic backgrounds what the history can tell us and how we can make things better. And as I said, this was an uplifting experience with you over these 2 days, and we must not take the rule of law for granted. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Professor Safferling, for these very insightful remarks and the reverberation of history that we feel in this courtroom 600. Please allow me, on behalf of the International Nuremberg Principals Academy and one of the organizers of this conference, to say just a few concluding remarks very briefly. First of all, I'd like to reiterate our great pleasure to host all of you here over the past 3 days and to have organized this conference in Nuremberg here. It is especially important to us that we organize the conference in this year at this venue. 2018 marks the 70th anniversary, and of course the last 2 days have been testament to the richness of the discussions. It is mindful of the significance of the legacies and of the trials themselves of both Nuremberg and Tokyo that form, if you like, the edifice of modern international criminal law, that it has been important to illuminate various perspectives and various facets now 70 years later. As has been said right at the opening of the conference, the idea to hold such an event here in Nuremberg, marking the 70th anniversary of the judgment of the Tokyo trial, was born quite a while ago, not least 2 years ago when there were the 70th anniversary events here in Nuremberg for the Nuremberg Trials. Creating a forum for dialogue, scholarly exchange, and fruitful discussions amongst practitioners and scholars is a core mandate of the International Nuremberg Principals Academy, and we have been delighted to have been able to take you on this journey over the past 3 days to create stimulating discussions. There's a tremendous wealth of experience and expertise which has been present in this room, and I think it's been a testament underlying the importance of having discussions and dialogue across disciplines, so interdisciplinary exchange, as well as having a dialogue between practitioners and scholars, as well as having a dialogue amongst Japanese, as well as Japanese with international experts. And over the last 2 days, we've really seen a critical appraisal of the various perspectives of the Tokyo trial, which will not end now on a Saturday afternoon, but will surely continue in the rest of the course of this year until the actual November anniversary itself, as well as then, of course, in the years to come. So what we see is that having the various facets illuminated, we very much see that legacies of this trial have been constructed and reconstructed, and it's important to note the legacies in the plural, be it the historical legacies, the legal legacies, jurisprudential, cultural, social, and so on. And indeed, we see that these are being constructed and that the power of interpretation is very much key to this whole exercise. And the sense of dissonance is part and parcel of the whole process. What we have tried to do, and I think you've been with us all on a tour d'horizon of much of the different ideas and institutions, as well as interests that have become enmeshed in all the debates that we've had in the last 2 days. So if this conference has contributed to deepening some of our understandings, as well as generated new questions, fostering exchanges, and interrogating certain arguments, sharpening certain arguments, then the exercise has been worthwhile, and it has been a pleasure for us to be here with you. So I'd like to take this last opportunity before saying that we greatly appreciated your presence here and have been very impressed by the experience, expertise, as well as the energy that has been palpable here in this room. I'd like to say a few final thank yous before finally closing this conference. Thank you ever so much for all the thoughtful contributions, all the careful observations, as well as the lively discussions that we've had here. And in particular, I'd like to thank again all our distinguished speakers and panelists for taking the time, as well as, of course, all the participants in the audience for joining us for the last 2 days. Our esteemed Foundation Board and Advisory Council members, thank you very much for your support, as well as all of those who have supported us. And this includes the Higher Regional Court of Nuremberg, as well as the Memoriam Nuremberg Trials. And then last but not least, I'd like to recognize all the Nuremberg Academy staff and the whole team that has worked to put together this conference and has worked tirelessly since last year already to make the conference take place here in Nuremberg over the last 3 days. So there I'd like to in particular recognize all the staff. And then very final comment, which links to the topic, if you like, of the last panel, from Tokyo to The Hague. Of course, this year, 2018, also marks the 20th anniversary of the Rome Statute, which sees a number of commemorative events and a number of critical appraisals of the permanent International Criminal Court that we have today. And also in October, we have a commemorative event here in the Courtroom 600 on the 20th anniversary. And of course, you're all invited, and we very much hope you're able to join us here. So without further ado, I'd like to wish you all a pleasant rest of your stay here in Nuremberg. Thank you once again. Wish you safe travels onwards. I believe grand transportation back to the city centre is already awaiting outside. And wish you all the best for your future endeavours. And once again, thank you very much. And we look forward to welcome you once again in Nuremberg one day soon. Thank you.